Hi, everybody. Dr. Friedman here, and I continue to gather my party. We've been playing GM-less games to kind of break out of the headspace that comes with traditional GM'd, DM'd games, where the DM is the world and the players are merely responding with a suite of particular skills that they can throw at a problem. And that is a habit that has its affordances and its limitations. And if we want to break out into games that have more flexibility for the players and have the players input more, we have to grapple with the challenges of freedom. And that's kind of what we face today with Brindlewood Bay, a game that for me as a keeper is pretty straightforward for me to run because I've done it so many times. I will say the book does not actually walk you through the stages of onboarding players particularly intuitively, and there's not really a kind of a clear path in that first part of the book to taking a tour for players of all the things that they've got. That said, what when you actually hand them their character sheet, there's very little that they have to worry about, and then the reference sheet is similarly pretty straightforward in terms of showing you all the different kinds of moves you can make. I almost wish, and maybe there is such a thing, for a kind of starting adventure, starting episode, which the Great Brindlewood Bay Bake Off has kind of become in my hands, which is I limit it to day moves. I keep the tone light until the very end. So some of the kind of more intense moves that a maven might make don't get played. Instead, it's a lot about character creation. It's a lot about the idea that they're shooting a kind of television show means that there is some turn taking that gets involved before it gets into free form. But it is still full of the friction that comes from players trying to figure out where their agency is. And that's a really interesting thing that I've been thinking about with Brindlewood Bay for quite some time at this point, in part because I was part of a group in Germany that was talking about mystery mechanics and player agency a few years ago. Some people have a really hard time with Brindlewood Bay because there is no answer to the mystery. So as opposed to the usual problems of playing to find out and not finding it out and being frustrated. Instead, you've got this scenario where the GM is doing a lot of work to hand the right clues that will be useful, but also appropriate to the kind of hunt that the mavens are making. And it can be a little bit of a reach in different kinds of ways at different kinds of moments. But in the same way that in my classroom, I find games that do have that kind of friction or difficulty or struggle of trying to figure it out really useful for articulating what's going on because students don't get as precious about things that they find frustrating. In a similar kind of way, I felt like our debrief was pretty useful in terms of thinking through what we want more of, less of. I mean, stars and wishes, not just on the level of is this a future campaign or how did this session go, but putting this into the context of games that we could play, games that we are excited about. And so that's, I think, really useful. I think the beautiful thing about the way that I've talked about this as a game tasting experience, as opposed to being wedded even for a few weeks to a campaign, instead kind of getting in and out of these kinds of experiences while we all kind of figure out what our role-playing styles are like, what kinds of role-playing we'd like to be like, which happened in a couple of conversations between players where someone was like, I want to play like you play. I want to figure out how to do that, which was kind of neat. And it's not me being prescriptive, but instead kind of saying, like, what are the opportunities and who wants to do what? I am excited to have many of these players meet the great Meg A. Baker and play under Hollow Hills on Monday, so soon, so that I know how much of the kind of navigating and negotiating is about system versus about me. Because that's the other thing about GMing is that I think I have a hard time with. I have friends who are, that's their comfort zone because it means they're in control. It means that they have more supervision of the variables. They get to play more player characters, any number of reasons, good reasons to enjoy being a GM. I think for me, the hard part is feeling responsible for the pleasure of others, which I think is actually overstating the case. But it's very real. And so I'm excited to see this group being run by someone other than me. I have a lot of thoughts about how everything is going, but that's what I've got about how this session tonight went. There's a couple of things on my handy dandy like list of possible videos that are not tied to a specific moment that I've been thinking about. Um, uh, which is to say, like how the group's being formed, my relationship to PDFs, the box of stuff that I keep handy for all kinds of reasons, like the clipboards and stuff, um, and a couple of other things like the geek social fallacies, which I've been talking a lot about with a couple of friends of mine. But that's all in the future. I hope your gaming is going well and that you're keeping well in this time. I think the takeaway for me tonight is we try stuff and we see what happens. We keep playing to find out. Take care.